Growing older isn't something we're taught how to do. It just happens quietly, year after year. But with time comes wisdom, perspective, and a deep understanding of what really matters. Those are some of the things we're going to talk about in this video. Stay tuned. Some of the harsh realities that we face as we get into our 70s and 80s are that time is finite. Time is getting shorter, and we're getting much closer to the end of this life journey than we are to the beginning. So time really matters. How many times have you thought, I'm not going to live much longer? I know I have. And sometimes you look at something and say, I wonder if this is the last time I'm going to do this. Or I wonder if this is the last time I'm going to buy this. We have a clear recognition of the fact that life is marching on, and it's marching on fast. One of the things about that is that we no longer take time for granted. You recognize that since it is finite, you really want to make the most of it. You want to do things that are meaningful to you or to the people in this world that you care a great deal about. When you're younger, there are many times that you can have things to deal with from a health perspective. Things can go wrong with your body, but typically when you're younger, you have the perception and the reality of the fact that it'll pass, it will get better, and you'll go back to being the person that you recognize as you. But as you get older, the things that start to happen, you understand that it's not necessarily going to pass. And in fact, the disabilities that you have as time marches on can and will very often get worse. You're going to have to live with your new reality and find ways to navigate a world in which you're no longer 100% in control. Your focus is around that and what you can do to live with it, to mitigate it, to make it get better. Do you also notice that it can be really hard to get a good night's sleep? That's one of the biggest issues for me. I fall asleep with no problem. I am asleep for a few hours and then I awake. And when I awake in the middle of the night, usually at the start, it's because I have to go to the bathroom. But I can't get right back to sleep very often. The things that we have to deal with during the day tend to come back and bother us in the middle of the night when it's quiet and the rest of the world is asleep. What is it that you're going to do to be able to manage the life that you're now living? I find for me, I try to find something that will help me get back into that sleep mode. Sometimes for me, it's turning on an old television show that will lull me back to sleep, maybe because it harkens back to earlier times when life was simpler, or maybe because I know the story or have no great need to know the story so I can once again relax. It happened to me last night. And last night I started to look through the options that I had, and I came across something that said that it was a meditation to help you get back to sleep. And I thought, how amazing that it was presented to me at precisely the moment that I needed it. I did put that on, and it really didn't take me all that long to fall back into a comfortable sleep. And I wound up having pleasant, comfortable, reassuring dreams that I don't always have these days. I think that's one of the harder things that we have as we get older, because whether you live with somebody or you live alone, the middle of the night feels very much alone. And you have to deal with whatever it is you have to deal with until morning light. As we think about our situation as we get into the 70s and 80s and things start to go wrong with our bodies or our ability to do the things that we did with such ease all of our lives, we wonder often about our independence. Will we be able to take care of our needs on a daily basis? Will we be able to do it without being a burden to somebody else? And many of us don't have somebody else to rely on. So we have to make things work in our own worlds, in our own way. And that's something a lot of people think about as they age. Are you going to need assistance just living day to day? Some people can afford to be in a situation where they are in assisted living. And for some people, that's not an option. Some people have children who will take them in and they'll live in an adjunct space, or sometimes they'll live with the family, and that's good for them on many levels, but it compromises your own independence and your ability to just do what you want to do when you want to do it. One of the major issues that comes up for many people as they reach this age is dealing with memory issues. I mean, how many times do you find yourself walking into a room and forgetting why you're there? Getting in the car, this happens to me periodically, and it's terrifying when it does. I will turn off onto a different highway or road than I've been on, and for a few seconds, I forget why I'm there. It never lasts more than a few seconds for me, but it's frightening when it happens. Memory issues can be very, very scary, and there's always the fear of dementia. Do you also notice that you seem to be seen less, or your point of view or what you have to share with the world seems to mean less to the people you're speaking to? It's almost as if you become invisible. The person you were, who was very interactive perhaps, is suddenly in a place where your words carry no weight, and people just look at you in that way that makes you understand that they think, oh, poor soul, and they'll just nod their heads, or they may say something dismissive, but you know that they're not seeing you as the person you still are inside. You have not given up the ghost. You're still there. They just don't necessarily know it. I think one of the hardest things to deal with is that we lose people along the way. Some of us are lucky enough to have our life partner travel this road with us and be with us all of our lives to the very end, and that's a great gift. And sometimes it makes for a huge loss, because almost always one of you is going to die before the other one. And the person who's left has to learn how to live in a world that no longer has that person who had their back, that person who really cared about them, that person who loved them, even the person that you bickered with all the time, but that person was there for you. That's a very hard thing. We lose people also, friends, they move away. They find themselves in that place of dementia where they no longer are the person that you knew and loved for all the years that you did. I think of my friend Linda. We had a close friendship. We talked about anything for a period of many, many, many years, and then she slipped slowly into dementia. And sometimes she knew exactly what she was saying, and she knew who I was, and sometimes she didn't at all. So in a case like that, you're losing the person twice. You lose them when they physically depart this earth, but you lose them much earlier. when they no longer are the person that you remember and loved. So that's a hard thing. Sometimes people move away, they move in with children who live in a far distant place. And sometimes people are just not well enough to spend the time with each other anymore. So all of that makes for a world that feels as if it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. We're lucky in a way because we have in this day, even if we're not able to get out there to mingle with people on a physical basis, we have social media. And I know a lot of people say there's good and there's bad in it, and I agree. But being able to encounter people in social media, talk to people, engage, keeps you, I think, more youthful, keeps you feeling more like yourself and far less lonely. I think one of the biggest things that we deal with in advanced age is loneliness. It can be a terrible, terrible thing. Dealing with finances is an issue in all of life, and many people are taught from a young age to do it right and to make sure that they're planning for their old age, and many are not. I was in a family that nobody ever talked about that. It was not something that anybody planned for, that they shared. And I grew up just wanting to do the best that I could with the life I had and not really worrying too much about the end of the road, because I somehow felt as if I would always feel the way I always felt. And I would always be able to function in a way that I always did. But it didn't turn out that way. I wound up getting sick. I was a very active person. I was a successful real estate broker. I helped people buy and sell houses for almost 40 years. And I loved doing it. And I loved helping them get to the next place in their lives, feeling good about it. But all of a sudden, I got sick. I wound up having a sarcoma. I had a major surgery in 2018 after a misdiagnosis that led me down a path of difficulty for 6 months. So my life changed appreciably. And here I was faced with the reality of, how do I survive? And that's a whole other video, and I'll certainly talk about that, but that's something that we have to deal with. And the less that you prepared for it, the more you have to deal with it today when you're less able to do it. So I'm dealing with some of those difficulties, and it's creating a lot of stress in my world where I wish there were not stress today, because it's hard enough to navigate this stage of life without having to deal with the pressures of, can I make it financially? So if you're younger and looking at this, I would admonish you, take care of the older person that you will almost surely become. Be kind to that person. Make sure that person is going to be safe and that you can live a comfortable and relaxed life. Do you find sometimes when you're with older people that they keep telling the same stories over and over and over again? I remember that with my mother-in-law. She was a lovely woman. She was a classy lady. She took wonderful care of her family. She kept an immaculate home. She was a wonderful wife, mother, and grandmother. She also, unfortunately, found herself, after her husband died, she wound up falling into the world of dementia, and life became much, much harder for her and for everyone around her. But she used to tell the same stories over and over and over again. And I know a lot of people will say to people, I've heard that story before, and cut them off. I never did that because I knew her need to tell the story was far more important than the 5 or 10 or 15 minutes that I had to indulge her and listen to it as if I was hearing it for the first time. I'm grateful that I was able to give her that gift, and it was something that I know was meaningful for her because she was sharing a story that she thought was new to me. So you might want to think about that when the people that you know tell you the same stories over and over again. And I find myself doing it sometimes too. Not a lot, but I find sometimes when I segue into a story and I am just starting down that road of the narrative, that I realize that I've told this person that story before, and they're either sitting there nodding their heads or they're off thinking about something totally different and just indulging my need to tell it. But that's one of those things that we deal with when aging as well. Aging has, my father used to call aging, and he never really aged because he died at just under 60 of a heart attack. But my father always used to say that growing older was life's cruel joke, because inside you feel the same. You feel like exactly the same person. But when you look at your body and you see the changes in it, and you recognize that your body will no longer perform in the way that it always did, and you can't count on it the way that you did, it's hard to come to terms with that. So once again, yes, Dad, it can be life's cruel joke, but it's also wonderful that you do feel young inside, if in fact you do. And I always have. I have never felt my age. I don't to this day. I engage happily with people of all ages. I don't feel age as part of who I am. There's another reality that sometimes it's hard for us to even voice. But as we come to the end of this life's journey, we really have to have plans about what's going to happen to us. Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to have a service? Do you want people there? What do you want to happen to the things that are important to you? Make sure that you have a will. Tell the people in your life what you want for your end of life. And I know it's not something that's necessarily easy to talk about, because you have to admit that you're not going to be here. Which leads me to another issue, and that is fear. I know for me, when I was young, I was very afraid of dying. When I was only 3 years old, my aunt was watching me, and I apparently asked her if I could go on a slide one more time. It was a hot summer day. I was wearing shorts, and apparently the cuff of my shorts got caught on the metal part at the top of the slide. I went over the side of it, and in those days, they didn't have any soft surfacing under you. I hit the concrete, and I was out cold. I was knocked out. I was unconscious. And when I awoke, there was a circle of people looking down at me. It's almost like the scene in a movie where you see something from the perspective of a person on the ground with a circle of faces above them. That was what I saw. And apparently what the people were telling my aunt was, don't bother trying to find a doctor for her. She's a goner. And this was a story that I heard many, many times growing up. So it made me realize from a very early age that you can die, and that you can die when you're young. It doesn't have to be something that happens to old people. So I was very, very fearful about death much of my youth. I think I was afraid of being separated from the people I loved. It was kind of like once also when I was maybe 5 or 6, I got lost on the beach. We were out for the day, and I walked over to the water's edge, and apparently I must have walked on an angle, because when I tried to come back, I couldn't find the blanket of my family, and I kept walking and walking. And apparently at some point somebody took my hand and was walking with me, but I remember crying and feeling as if I would never see my family again. And it was a terrifying thought. And I think I looked at death the same way. I don't think I ever felt that death was the end of your being. I truly believe that we are ongoing spirits living a human experience, but the person, the essence of who we are, does not die. It just takes on a different form. And I think that we all, I think we come to this life to learn lessons, and I think that we will go to a wonderful place, most of us, if you haven't really done cruel and terrible things to other people willfully. So I was very afraid of that most of my life, I would say. And I find the older I get, the less afraid I am. And I don't want that to sound as if I'm braver than I am, because I'm still afraid of the process of dying. I am afraid of what is going to happen. What is it going to feel like? So yes, I'm afraid of that, but I'm not afraid of leaving this planet. I'm not afraid of the place that I'm going to go, because when my father died, I had an incredible, very spiritual experience that I've talked about before in my videos, and I'd be happy to discuss again if anybody wants to hear about it. But fear is another component of getting older. And for some people, it gets really harder and harder. And I think especially for those who really didn't have a lot of emotional support in the years of their lives, or people who see life as a terrible place or a horrible experience or something to be gotten through. And that actually led me to another thought about this. I think it's so important, whatever age we are, to live in gratitude. I think what you put out into the world is what you draw back to you. It really is that power of attraction. You attract to you that which you put out. And I think every day we have the power within us to create a better day than it might have been, but you truly have to believe that that is a possibility, and be grateful for the things that you do have rather than dwelling on the things that you do not have. I don't know where my future is going to take me. It can be a scary place. I have financial issues that can make my life very, very difficult. But I am truly grateful every day that I wake up for all the good things in my life, and there are many. And I will appreciate them every single day. And I would say to you, if there's any way that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps on the days that feel so tough, and just know that it can get better, and think about the things that are good or have been wonderful for you, you'll find them. If you have to search for them, you'll find them. It'll make all the difference in the world. I've always been a very spiritual person, and I've always wanted to help other people when they're going through difficult times, probably because of some of the things I suffered when I was very young. I suffered the loss of my Uncle Harry, who many of you who follow me know about. He was somebody who just absolutely loved me just because I existed. I didn't have to do anything special or be anything special. He just loved me. And he was only in my world for 6.5 years. He died very suddenly. He was in his, I think he was about 57 when he died. And he had a premonition before he died that he was going to go. And he mentioned to somebody when passing a funeral home days before he died, and he said, "I'm next." And I think part of me felt that he had control over leaving, and I was devastated by his leaving. I really was. I've always been a very spiritual person. And as I say, I have always cared about what other people are going through and trying to help them in some small way to make it better. Do you ever notice that there are certain people, not necessarily of a very advanced age, some people are born old. Some people are really old and grumpy, and it's as if everything in their lives is an annoyance. Don't be that person. Don't be that person if you can help it, because you only make your life more miserable. So if you find yourself going there, you might chuckle and say, "Not today." One final thing for this, and it's certainly a topic that I would like to talk about again, because there are so many other things to talk about, and there are so many wonderful things about aging. There really are, and I'll go into that in a separate video. But you have transitioned through all the stages of your life. You've gotten through all of it, and some of it was really tough. Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace for the things that you've mastered, for the place of peace that you might have come to, for the place of understanding. We'll talk about this again soon. I hope you got something out of it. I would love for you to share your stories and some of the things about aging that are meaningful for you, or if you're caring for somebody who's older, what are some of the things that you've had to deal with? I really want to hear your story. And the truth is, something you have to say might really resonate for somebody else and make a difference in their lives. We will definitely talk soon. Take care.